Hi everyone, it's MechMaster J. Today we're gonna revisit my second video, the first one with any real content to it. I've been meaning to do this for about 2 months now, sorry. Um, I could have done better on it. I was out of patience at the time. I had done God knows how many tries, and I didn't realize I could in fact do something like a 22 or a 10-minute or even more than half an hour long video. I don't know if that was because of issues at the time. I don't know if it was the particular internet router and location. I don't know what was up with it. Um, I can do a lot now. Um, for the record, after this, I am going to be doing an exam. Or, well, I'll be studying for an exam and then doing the exam. Not a smart thing to do, but yeah. Anyway, so second video needed work. I was running out of patience. I'm gonna make up for that by going into background. Though I am hearing people at the door. Let's give it a few minutes. I'll be pausing in the meantime. Actually, false alarm. Turned out that I was hearing the wrong door open or close. So let's get into this, right? I have an approach to science fiction. Um, this comes from me not being an expert and being very behind on a lot of science and hearing a lot of things that sound like science fiction and that I know are probably real and not really having the skills to decipher any of it, blah blah blah. Also, pardon the glare. You know what? Let me turn a light on. There we go. I hope that makes everything better. Sort of, kind of, at least gives a nice ability to see me and not have too much of this crap make me look like I don't exist or like I'm a big shadow. Ooh. And that's something I've had to think about a lot. There's not objectivity to our senses, there's contrast to our senses. Anyway, my approach to sci-fi is not to shut all of it down because it's not scientific. Um, That's how a lot of people work when they are trying to figure out how magic should work in fantasy, which is a patently ridiculous idea to bring our laws of physics into a place of a different set of laws of physics. Because it's not how it works, right? And at that rate, you can't have magic. So, similarly, if you try to keep everything to science fact, or science reality as I tend to call it, you can't have science fiction unless you're just trying to predict potential technologies into the future. I'm not a scientist with a high degree of understanding of physics of any real kind. My last science class I took was a while back. Not that I don't like science, it's just I would need a very big refresher course, or two or three, before I could start jumping into things I can't predict anywhere near 100 years from now. So my approach instead is let's go somewhat comic book logic-ish with it. This isn't, oh, we're gonna do Planet of the Apes per se, but throw me something about color physics and a bunch of lights being thrown at someone, and yeah, sure, I guess you could have that villain in The Flash work out if you suspend a little disbelief. Similar technology principle here for my sci-fi. Um, However, getting into the subject of suspension of disbelief, I know enough about outer space on a basic level of understanding outer space that I know that you can't use a basic spaceship from the Age of Discovery and keep everyone alive in it. So I've consumed a lot of media where that is the summation of what a space pirate is. This is not exactly intelligent, and it is very lazy writing. Usually it's a one-off thing in the first place, and my brain immediately goes, that's okay if it's a pirate thing alone, but this is also in space. Okay, let's pretend for a moment that we don't also have to talk about technology level because of being centuries in the future. A wooden ship designed to travel on the high seas is not designed to keep air in, it is designed to keep water out. That's a big difference. Because if I open up anything that's supposed to help a cannon actually be fired from a gun deck, I let out air over time. This is also a situation where there is a source of fire in outer space, and it's not contained with any amount of oxygen from Earth on a cap or something. So what that means is, while we can have bullets work in outer space, I'm not sure a cannon you have to light with a candlelight type of fuse is gonna work. You'd have a hard time lighting it. If you could light it and then it ends up going all the way down and burning and doing the gunpowder, then yeah, sure, it'll fire. But if you fire it and that's a sealed room because you've tried fixing your oxygen leak, but that's still an open flame in this pressurized chamber, you might blow the place up, and you will at the very least lose oxygen you can't afford to lose. Gosh, this is making me think someone would have to invent laser technology, as inconvenient as it would be, or otherwise develop too many kinds of missiles, because it sounds an awful lot like otherwise you just lose a lot of oxygen and risk blowing the ship up. Uh, Ignoring that though, right, there's not just that with the technology, there's also how many times can I run into characters named Blackbeard before I get tired of it being in my mediums I consume at all? There's other factors, like how many times can someone have the name Blackbeard in a family tree or otherwise pass it down in history before I don't believe you, either as a character or as a reader of that statement or a listener of that statement, regardless of my suspension of disbelief, right? If I say that there's a secret agent codenamed Blackbeard in a new Space Pirate Consortium, that's you might be able to get away with hearing it. You will not be able to get away with hearing it and suspending your disbelief. You're going to disbelieve that, I think, I assume, right? I would, especially because I'm reading it. Reading it somehow makes it worse. I don't know why. So to me, Space Pirates can't be the same thing as children's shows or anime. They have to be done smart. They have to be done with my own mind trying to grasp how they happen. So I have my own ideas about how space pirates happen, and they're kind of loose. It's basically anything that might create a criminal group could create space pirates, as long as they have space technology and the ambition to use it. Also, probably also a basic enough knowledge of how to use it. right? You're not really going to find a group of kids that don't know anything are suddenly able to make a giant ship work unless it's by accident, and then, oh no, they've been whisked away uh, by several light minutes or light hours, and well, we finally figured out how to make the ship stop, and that would be a great movie plot. You could arguably sell it in a game if you are the players. It's a fascinating concept. I think if you had to deal with a an NPC faction, hostile or not, or even allied, that had that backstory, that would sound very one-off group. You would not see a second episode with them if you put it in a show, right? Is how I would describe that, right? If I say one off, I mean one time use, right? You will not see it again, right? It's a healing potion. You don't get a new healing potion, you have to go buy one. And villain and NPC and other, groups that aren't the players or that could be the players if the players are willing to join them. These are helpful, especially when you make sure they can make enough sense and can be compelling enough that they could stick around. And if you provide enough quests that make enough sense that they could continue to be enemies multiple times, right? Um, to me, one-offs really should just remain a role for named characters, especially final bosses of a particular story. Because let's put it this way, right? If you can have Hydra remnants, clearly the bosses were the one-off part, and the organization was not, right? Kind of how that works. Usually you have to use magic to bring someone back to life, or use nanomachines, or just a back-to tank now, apparently. Um, well, not apparently. That's usually more robotics than back-to tanks now. You get the point. Um, Named characters require a special way to come back from the dead. A regular organization does not need a special method to recollect itself in pockets and then be a problem. Which is also what could make space pirates a really helpful thing, because let's say I have a group, they're called the Ghosts of Mars. I don't know. They've been harassing little settlements on Mars. Uh, they've been threatening the oxygen supply device, and they have been able to make a killing off of that, blah, 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 right? Let's say they have a lot of people, 100 people, 50 people, something like that, and then you kill the leader. Leader's gone. Leader is the head uh, of the military organizing capability. For some reason, just them. Those guys scatter, right? You have 99 or 49, and, maybe you've got like 20 people or 30 people you also took down. So you've got like, depending, you've got like 20 to 60 or so people that are still around from that organization. Maybe they're not interested in just fucking off. Maybe they're not interested in going to jail. Maybe they now want to spite you for stopping them from doing their big heists and threatening oxygen supplies on Mars. That group could come back. Doesn't even have to change the name. It doesn't even have to put a 2.0 on the name. It could just be, well, next guy in charge. But the guy that was in charge originally, he's not coming back. Right? That's a little bit of difference. Sorry about that. And this is what I mean, right? A final boss or a named character, they could be a one-off. A group has a harder time doing that. And it's better if a group has a harder time doing that because, as I may have mentioned with some of this stuff, if I could run 8 sessions or 6 sessions or even just 3 sessions with the same organization as your baddies or as a neutral group you're trying to convince to become your ally. I don't know, some kind of quest, right? Takes a few sessions to do. That's, and especially if they can come back, right? If you, uh, let's say you beat up the Ghosts of Mars, you haven't beaten all of them. They were like a 2 or 3 session event. And then 12 sessions later, they come back, they want revenge. They pick the perfect opportunity to ambush you, they make it a problem. Maybe you have to retreat, maybe you lose some people, um, right? You need another 3 or 4 sessions to, you know, recover, go figure out information, start the new attack on their base, and then you take another session on top of that to finish the attack on their base, and then you finally wipe them out, right? That's reusability. That's a 2-time use, basically, and it's something so simple, right? They strike with a vengeance, and then you wipe them the rest of the way out. That's not a one-time group. I like the idea that you could do that with a lot of groups, right? Oh, you've made a new ally, and then as your ally, they could do things for you if you ask them, right? Not a one-time group. It adds a different depth to everything if you can make it so that things are not one-time groups or one-time characters. Because the thing is, I've had to deal with a lot of one-time content, especially in looking at Dungeons and Dragons. There's stuff that's so ridiculously coded and tied to certain stories, it's very difficult to separate them out. There's a number of I'm sure there's definitely probably assassins I couldn't ever use again. There's wizards I know that I couldn't use again. Right, couldn't use outside the stories, I mean. There's legendary creatures I can't use outside of certain stories, realistically. And it's not necessarily you can't, it's that they have a thing related to that, and they're kind of important sometimes to how that creature functions, or how that mage casts spells, or how the assassin is causing problems. So if you keep that on the stat block, but they can't use it, it becomes a very different encounter, right? That's if you're talking about an encounter, right? The point is keeping things a bit separable and a bit not just one time. Because even if I look at something that I could separate out, but it's a one-time use type of character, or a stat block, or a magic item, it's easier to make something that's multi-use and then only show it off once, rather than to have something that's only meant to be shown off once and then have to explain stuff, rewire stuff, so, just remake a block so that they could show up again. So, anyway, so space pirates, right, and the cult, right? Space pirates in my game, they could come from damn near anywhere as long as there's the potential for crime. That's how I define this stuff. It's very loose, it's very flexible. I have material to make sure that if you want inspiration, or if you want to modify an existing group, or if you want to come up with a new banner and a certain bounty size, right? Stuff like that. It's all good. And then with this cult, right, that I'm writing up, the cult has a bit of a different reason to be there. It's partially a challenge to myself. It is partially a challenge to everyone's sensibilities about what constitutes a space pirate group. Part of it's also there's tropes about cults in cyberpunk things, and I wanted to make one make sense and throw it in if they're gonna exist. Um, Admittedly, I don't consume too much cyberpunk, so I know that yes, there are groups, there are data cults, I guess you could call them, right? Um, they worship the idea of the singularity. This is kind of a weird thing to think about because there can be theorizing about the technology it would take to cause a singularity and what that would or would not entail. I think the idea of a cult around that is a little more, in terms of having genuine reverence, I think that's a little harder to sell. Unless you're talking to a bunch of people that are so desperate in life, again, crime, right, tragedy, that kind of thing, that they don't want to be in reality. They don't care about reality. The more you try to give them reality all over again, the more they will reject it stronger and stronger and stronger. About how any cult works, and they will take their newer teachings or their upbringing alternatively at face value a lot of the time. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they are young and bright and they realize, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I've actually talked to some ex-cult members before here and there. It's an interesting thing and very tragic at the same time because their frame of reference is around the cult for a lot of their life. Um, I have a friend who was raised in a Hasidic Jewish cult. Keep in mind, I'm Jewish, they're Jewish. Um, but it's a cult, right? Very rare, but not impossible to happen. And the relationship they have with the texts of like the Torah and the Tanakh as a whole, or with the Talmud, is their first instinct is to interpret it the way the cult would have, or alternatively, they might bring up that they know the interpretation of the cult and they're not sure if that is the right interpretation. Um, it's a very, from what I can tell, it's a very confusing scenario. And that makes sense, right? Someone's trying to manipulate you and take you away from reality. They have to confuse you. They have to make you doubt. They have to make it so that the information you have is not reliable until it's the only thing you know. Then it feels reliable out of desperation, not because it's actually true. But you'll start to operate like it's true to adapt and survive to all of it. So digital cult's kind of hard to cultivate in terms of the fact that it is a cult. You have to have people who don't know anything about the tech. You have to have people who are too pained by reality to care. Um, it could even help if you're offering them certain things that shouldn't be offered as rewards, right? Um, Offer them money, offer them drugs, offer them the perfect girlfriend, arguably, right? If they are picking from a quote congregation, right? You could imagine something like that, couldn't you? Um, oh, I found the perfect match, just stay with her and she'll love you for all time. I mean, it's the ultimate fantasy if they say it that way, right? These are people whose heads are not in good places. I hate to have to be the guy to draw the connection between poor mental health and extreme behavior and possibly crime, because it sounds ableist when I start talking about this stuff so explicitly, especially with regards to cults, but it's a reality. Um, so cult, right? It's a challenge. It's a challenge to myself. It's an acknowledgement that this shit happens. It's an acknowledgement that you could honestly make a cult about anything. On the lighter side of it all, right? The less heavy side, I like cosmologies, right? The first thing I look for in a fantasy setting is the start of everything, right? The creation mythos. Who are the deities? Um, what are their roles? How do you relate whether there are other fantasy races here, or is everything just human? What's the origin of magic? Um, where did the sun come from, if it came from somewhere else? What is the antagonistic force, if there is a personification of it, right? Are there demons? Are there angels? Um, is this a polytheistic setting other than just having a good deity and a bad deity? Because trust me, Satan or Lucifer, what have you, is a kind of deity. A deity is a personification of an aspect of reality, and if evil and good are considered aspects of human behavior uh, that are tied to reality in a lot of mythical and mystical systems, good and evil can be personified via deities. Technically, there is a duology, not duology, dualism to Christianity, therefore, at least if someone still wants to pretend that the Trinity is not three people like the word says. Okay. Anyway, so I'm good with cosmologies. I could write one up in half an hour. I could identify, um, and I don't have to include savior characters in any of it either, or an apocalypse. I could just say, okay, there were three beings, they were all brothers, and then from there start weaving a story, right? Maybe one of them is good, one of them is bad, one of them is dead now. I don't know. Easy enough story to tell. I could make one up. I'm not gonna do it. Uh, but I like looking at those. I like making them. I like analyzing them. Cult lets me flex that a little on the lighter ends of why there could be a cult. Furthermore, with all these different organizations, which in part are designed to give me inspiration for more parts and for names of characters and for just things you could go fight realistically or make allies with or whatever. A cult offers something a little more tempting than just, hey, this is a perspective. Okay, a cult is so delusional they live in a whole other world. And if you're convinced that giant robots have souls, if you're convinced that a flamethrower is literally using divine power, hope everyone knows where I'm going with this. You could start using the cult, presuming that its perspective is true and honest, and along with its cosmology especially, to make a fantasy setting. One of the nice things about a fantasy setting compared to a sci-fi setting is bullshitium. I can make up what I need to as long as it is conceptual. If you use toilet paper as a casting component, it will have a nice smell to it, is something I could totally imagine in an urban fantasy setting. It wouldn't be a very fun sounding, it would be a very laughable sounding concept until someone found that, oh, certain spells actually are terrible smelling, so I better get toilet paper. It should be a, little bit of 2-ply or something, but I could see something like that, and I'm already very familiar with D&D 5th edition. I'm already very much into fantasy. Why the hell wouldn't I want to do something like this, right? It also makes it so I can handle storytelling a lot better. Because I don't have to be like, oh, how did they leave a completely undetected crime scene if such and such technology exists here in the future? Something where maybe I have a particular blind spot on how I've set up the tech because, again, I'm not the tech expert. I'm just providing concepts and hoping they sound about right in a conceptual level. I don't have to be so cagey about that with magic. I can just say, someone brings up a crystal ball and they ask you to look into it. And then you see the future of something that's supposed to happen 10 days from now. We don't know where, and we don't know why. And then offer you a quest. Trying to think if there's anything else to really say about all this. New factions give me more weapons because unique design principles, especially with the cult. The cult might even have things where they're not designing anything in a certain line of model for combat. It could just be, I don't know, it happens to have a giant axe because it's designed for cutting down trees. I don't know. Something like that could be kind of interesting. I think I have a few civilian mechs I could even throw in from time to time that might make their way just to make sure there's rain still, especially if it's a place where there isn't a lot of rain, but where rain could be useful. That's a whole other unit that could be used if I do that. That's a fascinating thing to think about too. Of course, at this point, I am limited with the cult. I have not thought about it in a little while. I still need to dig up a few notes here and there that I've made just by bullshitting. I still need to revisit the earlier video just in case I left something there. I guess for now, that's it. I hope everyone liked the video. Let me know. If you have thoughts, just put them in the comments. That's all. Bye.